Let's bring in our political contributor, Chris Uhlmann. Chris, a lot on the economic front today. As Cameron rightly points out, we await the national accounts, expected to be weak and show a weak economy, but the governor, just as interesting today in terms of those remarks.
Yeah, and if you're the government, you'd be a bit worried now, wouldn't you, that if they're preparing perhaps to lift rates, if inflation proves stickier than they imagine, and all the indications we have at the moment are it's stickier than they imagine. That's something that they genuinely don't want to happen before the next election. And don't forget, we have the tax cuts coming into play from July, which will push more money into the economy and should push up, you would imagine, consumption, which will push up inflation. So the indicators are at the moment that, you know, that rather than the rates coming down, that they may well go up. Bad sign for the government.
And politicians crave a bit of certainty, and this is anything but certain, is it? Because you've got, we don't know what the RBA is going to do. We don't know exactly what the economy is going to do. So does it feed into the idea, the narrative that the Prime Minister might go a few months earlier, maybe November?
Depends on what he imagines is going to happen over the course of the summer. And I think over the course of the summer too, energy prices are going to start playing into that too. And the actual stability of the energy system might start playing into that, according to what the energy market operator is saying. So you don't want to be heading into a summer where you're fearing about blackouts and wondering about whether or not that there might be an interest rate rise. So, of course, all these play into their calculations. But Kieran, I reckon, you and I both know at the stage, I don't think the Prime Minister knows when the next election might be. He will be watching events and responding to them. And the old saying in politics is the Prime Minister will go when the Prime Minister thinks he can win the election.
And they think that there's a few things working in their favour. One is that when voters zero in on Peter Dutton, that they have doubts, and two, on nuclear energy, that there are real political doubts over that too.
Yeah, and Peter Dutton has taken a big political risk in deciding that he's going to push the nuclear energy barrow, because it is pushing uphill at the moment. There is genuine resistance within the electorate, so it's a difficult argument. It's probably a long-term argument that Australia has to have, and I think we absolutely should lift the ban and have the debate, because in 15 years' time it may well be necessary if you're going to hit net zero. And don't forget, that's the target in the end. And at this stage in the government's plan, gas is there all the way through until 2050, and it has to be. I think the issue at the moment is short-term. It is we need to work out how we run this system over the next 2 to 3 years without crashing the car. And at the moment, things aren't going as planned by the government. The transition lines are not going in as they should be. The wind turbines aren't going in at the pace they should be. Prices are rising in that part of the development of renewable energy, because the entire world wants the same product at the same time. Those prices can only rise, and in the end, you'll pay for the total cost of an electricity bill, which won't just include wholesale prices, which are pushed down somewhat by renewable energy. It'll include the transmission costs, which are pushed up by renewable energy, and the long-term trajectory of prices is up.
The argument that Chris Bowen made on nuclear this week in The Australian in his piece, among the other various points he makes, is that when you're only feeding back in or getting paid for, essentially, nuclear energy for a percentage, maybe 60% of the time, 55%, whatever it is, then it makes the commercial return all that more difficult, given those facilities run 24/7.
Yeah, but the problem with all of this argument is that Chris Bowen has never given us a total system cost for what his plan involves. And when you talk about the cost of nuclear energy, what about the cost of Snowy Hydro? Now, that's one project which has gone from $2 to $6 to $12 billion, $20 billion with transmission lines. And by the way, it doesn't generate electricity, it shifts the time at which electricity is delivered. So it's a big battery, apart from anything else. So we need to look at generation, and we need to look at the stability of the system. And all those things come into question. Kieran, if you look at the integrated system plan, which the energy market operator has put out, there are really serious concerns about the stability of our system over the course of the next couple of years and the cost of that energy. And I think that's what we should be focusing on. How do we get through the next couple of years to the plans that the government have for the next 2030 targets, or 2032 if you're in Queensland?
Yeah, indeed. Yep. So doubts on both fronts, or difficulties on both fronts. But the government, as I mentioned, feels like it's got the political upside in terms of that debate.
If it shifts, though, around the cost of living and the cost of power, they won't have it. So it depends on how adept both sides are now at arguing their cause. And if I was the opposition, I'd be saying, well, I'm not in government. You tell us how you deliver that. By the way, what was it? $275 price cut? That's not a $300 subsidy, by the way. It's going in the opposite direction to what the government promised. So when does it stop? and start to come back down. And I'll make this prediction. We can't tell what's going to happen in the future. Electricity prices over the long haul are going up. There's only one direction. No matter what we choose in future, it will be very, very expensive.